Oh, official background time.
I see I still have my awesome OWASP background. Let me swap it with something else. None. Hey.
I always like the Gundam wing in the back.
Fizzy, no, we don't hear. Ah, he's already dropped out. Perfect. Let me at least start by sharing my screen.
Don't forget notes, Glenn.
Yeah, I was on it. So we have this, we have the link to our awesome notes. Let's see. Let me make a copy of the new agenda. Like that. Page break. There we go. Let me see. Ah, I saw Christine also joined us, so let me already enable her. So welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Please go also to our meeting notes and agenda notes to mark your presence as well, and mark it black. For some, I already did because I see them. For others, I don't. Ah, yeah. All right, perfect. Yeah. Do we have any new friends? I don't think so. It's probably the same usual suspects as always, right? Yeah. All right. Somebody helping to scribe a bit, that would be great. I will also try to do it. Based on the stream too, what are the agenda items that we actually want to discuss? Because I do have definitely a couple. I don't know what the others of the group have as additional agenda items.
No, I think that's it. I think we might be having a short meeting, maybe.
All right. One of the things that I actually wanted to discuss in terms of materials with this group is that for now, when we have, like, for example, the labs and the environments that we created, and this also ties a bit into the current 2.1 goal, existing content and improving and expanding the content and training. Currently, we are covering and already have like the Java, Node.js, and the Python. And what we have is actually the explanation of vulnerabilities. And we also have the exploits, how to do actually the exploits for it. Currently, what we do not have yet, and this is actually a question that I wanted to ask here, are also the correct implementations for that specific functionality or vulnerability. In the past, what we do and what we decided was actually not to include also, the fixes. So take, for example, cross-site request forgery, Python. So here we have the reconnaissance phase, the explanation of what is the vulnerability, what is the issue, giving you more background. Then we have a chapter of exploitation. So what is actually wrong and what can a hacker do and achieve with this stuff? But I feel we might also want actually to include like the secure implementations as what should a developer do. In the past, we didn't, because of course there are 1,000 ways to actually achieve it and implement it. But looking at where we want to go to and making the whole learning experience a bit more smoother and quicker, yeah, we might want to add this. Why we didn't in the past, because you know, I really have the philosophy and the mindset to become good at something. You need to have pain, suffering, crying, and really learning. That's awesome, but maybe here, as we are really trying to also speed it a bit up and help people, you know, progress quicker, we might actually want to make the pain a bit less for them to also, for example, provide here an example, right, of what the correct fix should have been or could have been for the different type of labs that we offer. So any thoughts about that from you guys? What do you think?
So if I understand correctly, it's not directly part of the lab, it's part of the documentation, like the knowledge graph, and perhaps from the lab you can access it. But if you want to go to the lab, you will cry. And if you want to stop crying, you can go to the docs to find the answer. Yeah,
Exactly, yes. Because it might be that, I don't know, you tried a couple of approaches, you ran the code QL and I don't know, the dynamic security testing from ZAP. It still flags it as vulnerable. Okay, what now, right?
I would say that this would, like, it's difficult because, like, there's some of them that we don't have implementations in multiple languages. So this reality is that we would have to, like, guide people, like, point it out, like, how would you go about, like, fixing the lab? Like, this is how we would go about fixing the lab. So I think that we could do that. I think the idea is great. And I think the documentation can be written on how you would go about fixing it. But as far as in the lab environment, I feel like this would have to come after after we decide how we're going to add the guidance to the labs a little better.
Yeah, indeed. But do you want, maybe that's also a good question then. Is it really that we should make guidance, or do we give like correct code example guidance?
Well, I know that a very big goal for kind of a lot of the work that's happening in the labs is making it so that you don't, like, have to open two browsers, essentially, where you have the write-up on one side and the lab on the other. You know, and I know that that's very impractical, and that's like bad user UI, UX, whatever. Like, so I know that's something that Okiki's trying to present some ideas on what potentially could happen and how we could organize this so that you have it, like, side by side. And that's what I'm saying. I think that this is what we were talking about. Like, if you did want to have guidance, like if you did want to have like a UI where you're pointing out and you're like, click this button, you need to be in control of that UI. So I think that it's a good idea. I just think that, and I think it should be done, but I think it has to be guided because we don't have implementations in every single language yet. And even if we did, I think the big question would be, like, how much more are you really gaining from some of these basic examples if we, like, leave you to do it versus the guidance? Because it's really hard to have like one or the other. And I think also it's worth thinking about what people want or what people would prefer, because I think that different people want different things. Like, I know a lot, shall we say, more seasoned developers kind of like, here, give me what I need to do and let me experiment. I know that's the ideology, but I know that that's not the ideology for like new learners and things of that nature. So I think that there's also that to think about.
Yeah, we could also say, depending on, I don't know, the profile and the what stream one is actually doing, we could say we only present like a part of the content and material. If you say, hey, my profile is I'm an advanced person, yeah, then you maybe only get like this first part, right? Or
Right.
if you pick a medium one, then type of person, you get the first and the second part, or
Actually, this actually brings up an interesting dilemma that we've been having. If I can pivot for 1 second, Glenn, because
yeah.
we have Avishai on the call, which
Yep.
is
Yeah.
so you are right, Avishai. We are building and we're trying to fit everything in a graph database. But then there's the question. So a graph database has nodes, right? And basically our graph database is cataloging different pieces of knowledge. However, the question that I would like to open up for this group that relates to this is, okay, so before the lab, could we pull up like Glenn, like an entry of a or WSTG, like 4.1.1, like just the basic one, because basically a node is a single knowledge object. So for example, you would have like an entry from WSTG. I could send an example if you'd like. But basically, how are we going to split that up is the question, because it is a standard, it is an entry, it is a thing, you know, it is a concept, it is a core concept. Yeah, like any of those, anything that's like chapter or section 4. Yeah, but you see exactly like that. So you have like summary, you have how it works. So would all of this be a single thing, or would we want to split this up where like you can interact with different sections of knowledge? You see my point?
Mm-hmm.
Because this can be saved as like a single data object. So where you basically just have, like the ID and just the name and this, and that's it, or we could split this up where each entry will have, for example, a summary or a description, and then maybe like, a demonstration piece, or so I don't know. I'm just talking out my rear, but
Mm-hmm.
you get my point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ideally, I imagine that we would want to break them down, but then it's a question of, okay, what's going to be the format?
Yeah. Also, and ideally, because for what we decided to move forward is actually to look at the testing guide for the offensive, and for the defensive part we look at the ASVS. So there we have like a structured sort of data set which we can make notes of for the graph. But the question is, how are all the other materials structured?
Right.
And how do we indeed break those down again? Because we can make an approach for this one, but it feels then that we need to have a sort of different approach for all the different type of materials that we are going to
Bingo.
consume.
Correct.
Before we continue, Christine, you have your hand up. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was gonna comment on the earlier question that you have, or your suggestion. So
Yeah.
if I understand it correctly, so you are currently showing mainly like the path that or just like showing what could go wrong, but you're trying to look for how to get guidance, of potentially give guidance of what they should do, right? Am I
Correct.
understanding? So the
I think so.
I was wondering, if have you ever had a chance to actually interview or the folks who are actually consuming the content and see what they might wish, like maybe interviewing different types of folks, maybe like the folks who are trying who are new to security, and just get a sense of what they are looking for? Have you had the chance to do that in the past?
That's a good question. So actually, because currently, I work at a company where we are using this platform already for like more than 3 years. We have like, I don't know, like 300-400 people actually trained, in security development using these labs. And the feedback that we there get, it's a bit like indeed Randall was saying, the more senior people, they like to play around and figure it out themselves. But we do see that indeed for the more juniors, yeah, they're struggling. And then, sometimes we see that they would go to a Stack Overflow or whatever, copy a piece of snippet there, and then try to embed that to see if it solves the issue. And Yeah, so it is a bit both
Oh.
cases, right? Then,
Yeah, yeah. Because
And if I may, Christine, if I may,
Sure.
another thing I want to point out, another thing that I've kind of observed is that you really have like multiple levels or different types of security training, depending on like what generation you were taught. So that's another big thing for us because like the new people that are just coming in, they're being told a lot of crazy stuff, to not call it something else. Stuff like, oh, security doesn't involve any coding. You could be allergic to coding and be in the security business. That's 100% fine. And we're talking like top universities that are telling this to students. And I'm not saying that maybe there is a version now of security where you don't have to code, or you like not knowing how code works is okay. But like still, you know what I mean? Because like, I'll be honest, I have had a lot of engagement with brand new graduates, and they're allergic to command line.
Okay.
Yeah, like you have no idea, Christine. Like they are very resilient. Like, you're gonna make me use this? This is still a thing? You don't have a GUI? What's wrong with you? It's like, bro, you're in the computer business.
Because it is very hard doing, like, I remember one time we had to work on a UI framework and trying to see if we could, because originally the education material was very much high level, and there were a lot of assumptions that you would already come in knowing, and they ended up pivoting to try to address the beginner and try to explain a lot of the core concepts. And there was like labs and how to do it and how to do it right. But because they addressed the beginner, it almost seems like even the people who are seasoned could typically get something out of it. And so you were able to hopefully cover everything. But the beginner was pretty important because at that time, that's who they wanted to target initially. So it could be an idea to try to see if you can do something for the people
and to add context, I think that's the direction we need to move in, because in reality, for like seasoned people, like, so I don't know if you know this, but SKF has its own operating system called Hack OS. So for seasoned people, you could just like give them Hack OS and be like, go figure it out. And for seasoned people, that's fine. For older people, that's fine. But for somebody new, that's like, what do you want me to do? Like, there's no arrow or flashing button.
yes, it's like, oh shit, I need to do the same thing I'm actually hired for, but I don't really have the practical experience to know what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's like Christine, I don't know if you know I'm sure you know about Kali Linux and how a lot of people think that everyone that works in this business uses Kali. And it's like, no, that's a learning tool that just is meant for you to learn. It's not like you really are going to have this operating system with a bunch of exploits installed and using that on a daily basis. That'd be a terrible idea. It's just a lot of, as I said, there's just a different level of expectation in different generations. And I think that that's something we also have to be aware of too, because there's also different learning styles. You know, there's the people that need the hands-on. You know, there's other people that learn better with lecture, you know, which we don't even have at all in SKF. So that's another thing. So, you know, there's definitely, in our observation, different expectations from different users.
True. Fuzzy, you have your hand up.
Sorry, I just want to see if you guys can hear me. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I've been having audio issues. Yeah, I was just wanting to go off the back of that, right? It's like, in all honesty, it's cheaper if we just approach the common denominator in all cases, right? In terms of like, first in terms of an MVP, and then start developing more advanced use cases for more advanced and selective users and user flow journeys in that respect. By targeting, you know, the common denominator that nobody knows security, regardless of how well you are in coding, then it allows us to actually create a more holistic structure putting out to the end user. It would help create a more holistic experience for them to learn through as well. But I was just want to also say, it's like a lot of this, my opinion, comes down to how we disseminate the information that we have presently. From there, we have a better idea of how we're going to transpose that information outwards to the end user, and how we can then dress that up. Like Randall said, you know, there's already some exploration by Okiki into how this can be done. Bringing it into the one user experience instead of making it multiple would definitely help in that respects as well.
Mhm.
So yes, Glenn, I think that is a worthwhile addition to what we're doing, is to add the solutions. I just think that delivery has to be thought about, but I think delivery has to be thought about overall. So I'm sure that we might be able to continue this discussion once we have our delivery stream a little bit more solidified. Because right now
Mhm.
we are limited by what we have.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely.
Does the SKF lab platform today support like a staged lab, or maybe
That's what we have.
so you can move from stage unfixed to stage fixed by a click of a button, for instance?
No, it's just
Uh,
stage.
Sort of. Maybe it's good also, you know, let me do a quick, then we also have it also in the videos for people who are not
Yep.
always be able to be present. But the idea is the following. So you have SKF, you can create an account or log in with the default user. So what we currently have, you know, the security knowledge framework is a bit more than only labs. Actually, it's also for security requirements gathering, the checklist from the ASVS, for example. So that's the other thing what we can do when you have these vulnerabilities and examples, you can also correlate them to security requirements. And a security requirement is also telling you a bit like, hey, what should you do? But again, it's a very not a detailed step-by-step level, right? Anyhow, so what we have currently is the labs. The lab section is more about offensive security, where you can really train and practice about the vulnerabilities and do them in a real application without doing anything harmful. So basically you can spin up one of the labs and you have it over here then where you can actually do your hacking, whatnot. So this is a local file inclusion. You have a menu, for example, then you can go and say like, okay, cool. All the labs, the idea is that it's very minimal, only one function that's vulnerable, because then also later on when you want to fix stuff, you actually know where to look and not learn the whole platform this is built in. Like for example, Python, the Flask API, or in Java, the Spring Boot. You want to make it as easy as possible. So here you see a full path to a file. And of course, when there's a bad security, you can just actually put in anything you want and read files locally from the server. So that is the lab environment. Normally you're able to play with this and do it yourself and figure it out. But again, if you have issues, you can click write up, which language do you want to see it, Python. And then here you have actually, the write-up, the one I just showed you. So this is really for, I say it, offensive, where we created this stuff. Then we have the other one, that is the hack operating system. So we have it for Python, Java. We also have one for Node.js, because those are the 3 languages that we currently have and support. And here indeed is more the idea that you have like a full environment. Hack OS, yeah, maybe it's a wrong word, but it's basically everything included in this, operating system in a browser, right? So here you have indeed terminal access. You can also say like, hey, let me think. You can also say have a text editor like Sublime of Visual Studio Code. And here you can also access all the folders actually, right? All the labs, for example, So we can go again to the local file inclusion, this one we just did, open. And now you can also hack it and start it here locally. Or you say like, no, I already hacked it, I want to actually fix it. So then you're focusing on these 4 lines of code, because that's where the issue is. And actually make sure that when you're going to call this danger sync, this open function, that actually the attacker cannot select random files anymore, but only the ones that are, you know, allowed by the application. You know, the other thing why we have this environment, because of course you can just spin off your own Firefox where you can access the lab. The other thing why it is, well, I would say more interesting, because we can also have like command line tooling or other type of tooling like Zap. So we can also give them Zap to run locally in this box against the local application that they fixed and started. We can run code quell over it, for example, to do the static analysis. And again, this should also help them in verifying the fix they do. But yeah, if they're really stuck, or as you also know, the tools are sometimes lacking context, lacking rules. So maybe the fix they did is actually not really good. But these automated tools actually, cannot really find it, right? So there you also might want to have like a proper code snippet or guidance, like, hey, this is what you should have done to actually make it secure, right? Yeah, so that's a bit the operating system here. And again, you can just install it, at least that's the idea. So you have a port. You can now also run this. So we can go to the, what is it, Python labs, LFV. We also have a starter script, by the way, for people who are not really familiar with, you know, how to install dependencies or start it or whatever. Oh, and I see I made it, didn't save it. There we go. So now it's running locally on this box, right? So now I can go here, I can type localhost. And now the app is also running here. This is, by the way, the old styling, just that you're not confusing. But again, the similar application. And the cool thing is you can now start also fixing it and directly see what you actually are doing, right? And then ideally, if you have fixed it correctly, you can say, hey, let's do an automated Zap scan on it and see if I actually solved it correctly. So as you see here, yeah, you have a lot of freedom to play, to, well, use the same type of tools and environment that you normally would also do as a developer or as a hacker, want to know more about also fixing and securing stuff. And as you can see here, it's now actively scanning and doing a check on the vulnerable application. Yeah, and ideally here in the alerts, you should get a path traversal, because this lab is actually about local file inclusion. And as you can see here, the dynamic application security testing tool was able to also, how you say it, do the local file inclusion vulnerability and find it that it's vulnerable, right? Because here we have the A2SA password A file again, that's being, here we can look at requests. So what is actually an issue? They changed file name to A2SA password A, and the response is actually this. Yeah. So that is indeed the bit more, I say it, the more in-depth lab environment, the operating system that we currently have. And it is true that in here, you're a bit more on your own, right? There's not a lot of guidance. So that is also what Randall was saying, and Fuzzy, I guess.
Yep,
that,
that's correct, yeah.
we should indeed make it a more of a workflow type of approach here, that also like beginners know actually where to go, what to do, and what are the options.
Well, we're not far, like Okiki and I made the observation that if you really think about it, to do most of the labs, you do need 3 planes. You need a code editor, you need the actual like output, and you need the write-up, basically.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, because another thing that, for example, here is not yet, I would say, that visible, but the other thing, of course, ZAP is like an HTTP interceptor. And for some of the vulnerabilities, like header injections or whatever, yeah, you also need to be able to intercept HTTP traffic. So
Mhm.
all the traffic that we're actually doing here in our browser, we actually also need then to tunnel it to your
Oh,
Zapper.
set a proxy, yeah.
Yeah, and then say local host, and then I don't know, port 8080. So all the communication that we're now doing, we can intercept, and we can then also see in ZAP to then intercept, modify, and forward it right to the backend server to then do the injections, etc.
yep.
Yeah, and this is of course one tool. Then we have CodeQL, we have SamGraph, we have dependency checker, we have all type of open source security tools that we would want to also make available here in this box. Then on the infrastructure security, because that's also part of the scope, there you will need to use like different type of tools, like I don't know, Hydra, for example, for some brute forcing and stuff like that, Nmap. So yeah, that's why we actually chose to have a more freedom, a free environment like this, because then it was easy to give all those different access to all those tools to be able to assess security and also verify if you did it correctly.
I think we should teach people how to use John the Ripper.
Yeah, that's also one of the things, right?
I don't think it even works anymore, Glenn. So old.
No, you will be amazed. That stuff still works. But you know, most of the
That's
people
scary to
actually
see.
go for like OCL hashcat, because you can actually use your GPU to brute force with some high number rate, different password length,
Wow.
and yeah.
Did
Actually,
you
I think
hear?
that's
Did
10
you
years
hear
ago.
about like the list of like 96 million most common passwords that got released like last week?
Yeah. You have the list of the 10 million top 10 million most popular passwords. So, you know what you normally we do with like with we're digesting a bit with OCL hashcat. You can easily give it that list and basically say, okay, for every different hash algorithm, convert those into hashes, and then you basically have a rainbow table for that top 10 million, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
See, Glenn, what we were actually messing about yesterday with the graph was, you see, like you could add labels to anything. And we were like messing around with the idea of adding a core label to stuff. So we could distinguish what is like core content. So you can make a query like, I want to know what core content is. And then we kind of got into this idea that if we actually break content down, you could actually label it accordingly, and you could actually make like journeys that way.
Mm-hmm.
Map out the journeys and be able to map out where content fits together. And then not only that, it also means that applying the content becomes a lot easier as well. We can make that
Correct.
workflow a lot easier. So when it comes to creating and designing new labs, that would be, you know, part of the overhaul of the workflow.
Correct. And for a lot of these additions, Glenn, what we would have to figure out is how they would basically end up looking like in the graph in order for us to come up with a stable budget of like what, like, for example, it would cost to index a lot of these things. That's kind of what we're hoping to get. We're hoping to get done what we currently have by Friday. So I think the intention as far as us is once we have what we currently have mapped out, it's just a question of what would all of this added to what we have look like.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it would be a lot easier for us to be of more assistance in terms of, okay, so from a budget perspective, what are these additions going to look like?
Yeah, because you know what I would also recommend that we will do, take for example, we have already data sets that's going in there, right? For example, the WSTG, the ASVS, the security fundamentals from David. I would also just, you know, because we have here also blogs, webinar, and podcast, I will also just grab some random blogs, yeah, about security and podcasts and YouTube videos and see, you know, how that would be embedded. I
If you'd
wouldn't
like,
say,
if you'd like to grab those over the next couple of days and have them ready for Saturday, that'd be excellent.
Mhm. Yeah, it can be just anything. It doesn't have to be correct. It's just to
Okay.
support the, you know, the
What I was gonna do
capability
right
of
now,
this
what I
unit.
was gonna do right now, Glenn, with Anthony, and Anthony, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is over the course of today and tomorrow, we're gonna try to just map out what we have of the WSTG, how that maps to the ASVS, and how both of those map to the labs that we have.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because
And we-
theoretically, the association out of all of those already exists.
Yeah, indeed. And we already created like an overview of the testing guide. Which type of labs do we have for different languages? The one for ASVS, we are going to also wrap that up and make it. So yeah, then at least we know where we have coverage. And at least the good thing about when we do it for and have coverage, for example, from the testing guide point of view and ASVS, then I'm sure that a lot of the personas that Stream 1 has identified, we actually can reuse a lot of that artifacts and materials, which we would, you know, need to do the bare minimum actually to actually make that course for that or that learning path for that specific persona easier to implement, right?
Correct. Now, coming back to David's course, this is what I was talking about at the beginning. Okay. So, how are we going to split that up? Is it just split up in sections, or how do we want to go about that? Because, like, yeah, there's going to be overlap there. Eventually, I imagine there's going to be overlap between courses. So, that's one thing that I'm trying to figure out is like, how would we split up David's course into like concepts, chapters, sections? Because the more granular we can be with the information, the easier it is to enrich with things like glossary terms and, you know, podcasts and videos and all sorts of jazz. So
Yeah.
that's the big question that I have is if there's a big course, or like, and I don't know if you want to call it a big course, but essentially David's course is kind of this singular object. How would you split that up? Like,
Yeah,
what would be the most optimum? Yeah.
so it's not optimal, but you know, he has different categories, right? So what I did actually for now, because as you know, this is only part of it, the labs, actually where we try to glue the whole courses and everything together is in the training section, right? And here basically you can say, hey, advanced training start, and you get all the content from David. And as you can see, the introductory requirements, that is what we decided to how to split it up. Now I don't know where I put my here. So requirements, for example. So here we have the requirements with every topic in the requirements. Privacy, risk management. We chop that up into this section. So that is how we did it. I don't want to say it's optimal. But yeah, I think that's also going to be a bit of the challenge when we.
I don't know if there is an optimal way of doing it. I just think that whatever we end up doing, I think that consistency is key. And that's why I do agree with you that I think that the librarian of all of this should be within SKF operations, because essentially it's really more than optimal. It's really a matter of consistency, I would argue.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, I mean, now, for example, with David Wheeler's course, I did it really manually, not ideally. But yeah, we wanted to have an MVP actually, right? But yeah, we should have.
Anyone have thoughts? Does anyone here have thoughts? Like Fuzzy or Christine, do you guys have thoughts about what might, like, the breakdown of this? Maybe.
Not right now for me. I still have to kind of get more familiar. But
Okay. No problem.
Mine is just working, given what what I know of the knowledge graph, is that, and I've said this to you, Randall, in private, is that the better we can disseminate the information that we have into small ontologies, small into taxonomical groups, we could better relate this information from the likes of David Wheeler, from different partners that can grow in time. Like we've spoken about, it's like that part of the workflow we could really leverage off the graph, the graph database, the knowledge graph is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So yeah, it's like here I would say it's like split it. I would honestly, the one thing I would say is like split this up, just take a chop and, a knife to it and just chop it into bits that we could then we don't need to duplicate information twice now, is what we got to also try and consider. It's like if information here in David's course has been duplicated in information that has been replicated in SKF, then only through the knowledge graph would we be able to see that, and then we could be able to bring, because then what you have is two competing, ontologies with each other. So what you would need to do then, right, is either simplify it into one or make a relationship between the two.
Yeah, we would have to establish a relationship between the two.
Yeah.
Which, like, for example, David Wheeler's course is oriented towards developers. So that would be like, so there would be different ways of filtering it, right, through the graph, because some things will be oriented towards developers and some stuff will be oriented towards, network people and IT people, and just there's different points.
We could give it a code, a rating in terms of like complexity in terms of code, right? And then that way we could filter out between like the low code, no code stuff and the more deeper complex stuff, again, through the power of labels in the knowledge graph.
Agreed. I like that.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea as well, so this is the original file.
Right.
So it's one big file. It's basically a book.
Does it end, Glenn?
You wouldn't say, but yeah, David really went above and beyond to write this, and that's why we also have it, right? It's very good material. It's very good for the fundamentals, right? Because it really goes into depth. Yeah.
It's quality.
But now, Glenn, you see what I mean also about the taxonomies of actually adding things. It's like, it's a lot easier to add things in a graph database, but still you have to think about how you're adding stuff, because in order for the data to work, like, the taxonomies need to work with whatever data that you're adding. If not, you're basically just adding another node in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
But
Indeed.
Fuzzy is right now. And to answer your question, Fuzzy, I don't think our intent is to necessarily draft a bunch of information. I think that our intent is to try to catalog, tag, and organize what's already out there and try to do it in such a way where a reader could basically get the whole scope so he can understand, in essence, kind of multiple documents at once in a way. I'm not saying that this will let you like, Superman read 3 things at once, but it should give you insight on how like everything works together, because everything to some degree does actually work together and say the same thing.
Yes. And it'll allow us to build and map out the labs, so it's like referring back to what we were talking about, I was trying to allude to with the holistic learning experience, is like through the power of the knowledge graph is like we could devise better learning experiences and journeys for our users.
Correct.
It's like the more we uncover and play with it, the more we realize how pinnacle that the knowledge graph becomes a backbone of this endeavor.
Agreed. So I would say, Glenn, for next time, we will try to bring kind of a sample of what the graph database is looking like and what the graph database will look like with Stream 3 or Stream 2's and Stream 1's proposal of the additions. I know that there's podcasts, videos, webinars, blog posts. I'll go through it and I'll kind of bring that next time and distribute that through the education SIG. So that way we could finalize our estimates and resources based off of that.
One remark, I thought I saw in the matrix of Stream 1 that there was also a mentioning of Ruby.
Yes, there is actually.
Okay. All right. So we also need to edit that one.
And then I need to, and we need to ask in the next meeting about that, about if the spreadsheet is ready to go. If it's ready to go, we can do 2.2. There was an action item to make a request for our other educational material. Yeah, exactly. So that it can be done if the spreadsheet's ready to go.
I think after the meeting they had last week, or I believe there was something sent in the mailing list that the spreadsheet was ready to go, but we can confirm.
Okay, I didn't get that. I might not be on that mailing list, maybe, but.
Right. Just going over the items that we have. Yeah. All right. Anything else we should discuss right now?
I think we're good.
Yeah.
For now. For now.
So for example, the blogs, podcasts, labs, I guess.
Correct, because we would have to figure out like what labels and properties go to each one before we can really talk about adding it real. And then like making these things is not difficult. Like making them for the whatchamacallit. It's not difficult from the point of view of like having something to do, but it is difficult from like you know what I'm saying?
Yep, yeah, it needs to be all tied together.
Yep.
Right, then I would say let's leave it as is here for now. We will get working on this week, so we have something to present next week as well in the global SIG.
Yep.
So it's a bit more clear in how it will look like and how we also can consume and then link and reference and use all that artifacts, right? Those nodes that we are creating then.
Yep. Agreed.
All right.
I don't know. Are we
Anything else?
having a meeting on for stream 1, or did they cancel, or is it still supposed to be
I-
happening?
Think it was after this one. Yes.
Okay.
Just after this one at the, well, 3 o'clock my time. So in 8 minutes, there will be stream 1.
Yay. I'll probably see most of you there.
Yeah. I need to pick up the kids, but Randall, let's meet in a couple of hours in the evening for me.
Yep, I'll be
Get
here.
again over. All right. Well, again, thank you very much, everybody, and talk to you all soon.
Likewise,
Thanks,
Glenn.
everyone.
Take care, dude. Peace
Thanks,
out.
Fuzzy. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Christine.
Bye.
Bye-bye.